All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at listening or watching the podcast here. Isaac has set this up for us, and we've got another great presentation for you, some discussion. It's going to be very free flowing, but this is some technology that I saw during one of my meetings with the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council. I'm on the board there and saw the product and thought, wow, this is something that all of us need to take a look at. A lot of our listeners are water related, but I do believe that this is going to expand into other critical infrastructures and anyone emergency management related. And then also, yes, for the most part, California, but this product and a lot of the things that Isaac and I are looking at and the technology that's in the emergency management realm is really nationwide. So we've got two excellent speakers here for you, some great knowledge we're going to impart. This is in the area of fire mitigation, and we're going to have several of these podcasts and discussions with various technologies. And I think at some point, in this conversation, we may even be talking about the potential partnerships in some of those areas. So I'm going to let our two guests introduce themselves, give a little bit of their background. We've got Shawn and Rob, and so let's start. Shawn, let's start with you and give a little bit of background, and then we'll hand it off to Rob. And then we'll go ahead and get some background on the company and the product and so forth.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. So it's still early January, and really appreciate the opportunity to participate. I'm Shawn Sahbari. I'm the founder of Komodo Fire Systems. We're located here near Silicon Valley in Northern California. And our basic premise is that if there's fires, regardless of the type of fire or the location, we want to be able to contribute, and we want to be able to help prevent, mitigate. And again, the mission is to save lives, properties, and the environment. And that's what Komodo's charter is.
All right, Rob.
I'm Rob Latham. I'm the business development manager, enterprise account manager for Komodo Fire Systems. I manage the day-to-day accounts of some of our larger enterprise accounts with some large utilities and some asset protection companies for insurance companies, things of that nature. My background is I've got about 5 years in EMS, working on the ambulance, and then transferring over into the private sector of fire, running heavy equipment, running dozers, masticators, forestry mulchers, doing that kind of thing for about 12, 13 years, as a contractor for CAL FIRE and the Forest Service. So I've been with Komodo about 3.5 years now.
Okay. Real quick, just something kind of, I don't know, one of those odd things. Komodo, how did you, it's probably for Shawn, how did you come up with that name?
Oh, there's a huge story behind that, but I actually asked my daughter to come up with a name. We were looking for, we came up with this chemistry, and it's a fire shield. It is a coating, if you will, that protects. And I like to combine the name of certain animals out of the kingdom to products because it's easy for people to remember. And so we're not first. We didn't invent that. There's a lot of cases with, the duct tapes and the Geico geckos and things of that nature. And so I was looking for an animal that had a thick skin, something that had a really resilient, kind of tough skin. And certain, animals came up, rhino, obviously we know Rhino Shield. They make the bed liners for trucks. And so that had been taken up, and two emerged, and one of them was the Black Mamba. And I thought to myself, we're not going to name the company or the product out of a snake. So, and the Komodo Dragon, and it turns out that the Komodo Dragon is got a really, really tough skin, and it's not penetrable. And so when I heard that, I thought it was a catchy name. And when we talk about Komodo, people think about dragons. Dragons, are associated with fire, and that's kind of where the name came from. There are other reasons, and I won't get into those, but that's kind of the short story behind how the name came to be, which is basically we put down a coating that makes it tough for fires to penetrate and to combust the underlying materials.
And so that kind of leads into really what a lot of listeners and viewers are going to want to look and listen and hear. What is the product, and how did you develop that?
Yeah, so I grew up in Silicon Valley. I'm an engineer by education. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a firefighter, and we didn't really set out to get into the fire business. The majority of my adult life was working with high-tech companies, people like IBM, Intel, Samsung, Seagate, all the who's who in the electronics world. And we were solving various problems, and it had to do with different types of coatings, different types of functional materials, corrosion, patterning, mainly microelectronics. But the industry from Silicon Valley kind of dried up and went offshore, and so we had to kind of pivot. And I had a couple of startups, and we started looking at some environmental activities around sustainability, on waste minimization. And in that process, Komodo was born. In other words, we didn't, just because we're in California and we have these wildfires, we didn't say, "Oh, look, that's an interesting area, or that's a growing sector. Let's go chase it." It ended up kind of falling into our lap, and it ended up being the solution to a different kind of problem that we were having. So what Komodo is on the material side, on the product side, and we have equipment and we get into automation and a variety of other things, but at the core, we try to prevent fire. In other words, the best fire, I think, is one, I actually steal this from Rob, but the best wildfire is one that never starts. And so whether it's at a campground, whether it is, your backyard and lightning, whether it's high winds. Today, I heard that Southern California is going to be experiencing high winds again. So they're putting people on notice. Obviously, in the last quarter, we've had fires in Malibu, Ventura. So all throughout the end of fourth quarter, we've had devastating fires. And so fire prevention is kind of the core goal of what we do, because if these monsters develop, and as you have seen and Rob has been involved with, they could take months, sometimes longer, to get under control. So a part of the Komodo technology is a prophylactic. We go down and we treat areas that are high hazard, whether it is a vineyard, whether it is a power plant, whether it is your home, or just, it might be a military base. So regardless of what the area is, if there's a propensity for fire and there is high fuel loading, then one of the things that we can do is we get out in front of it, and we can attack the problem in advance and create a barrier, create a firewall, if you will. And so that should, 4th of July fireworks, or somebody being careless with their barbecue, or, lightning in the middle of the night start, you have a certain amount of protection. And so, and working with a utility company several years back, Rob knows we were asked to make the product last, so that it wouldn't just wash off at the first, rainfall. And we did. So we've used starchy compounds, root vegetables, if you will, and others in our formula that allows us to basically make the product a little bit water resistant. I don't want to say it's waterproof because eventually it will dissolve and it biodegrades into the soil, and it's very, very safe on your persons. But you can actually put it down in the area of interest and create a fire barrier that will last in California pretty much the entire fire season. In other words, you put it down in the summer and you have protection until November, December when the heavy rains start.
Okay. And with that type of, I guess, product, how is it being used by really, we know, well, give us some examples in the electric industry, but then also, since our area is water, have you worked with any water agencies?
So yes and yes. The lion's share of, if you call fire retardants as a category, right? We've all seen the air tanker drops or the helicopters dropping the water buckets or the red stuff out of the sky. So that is really the from a volume and a dollar perspective, the largest consumer of these categories of materials. But we're taking a different approach. We're saying, okay, if we don't allow the wildfire to grow to be a monster, and we can contain it, we can prevent it from growing that big, perhaps we don't have to use as much, right? We're using a scalpel instead of a chainsaw, the type of if you use the analogy. And so for the case of utilities, we started off working, obviously, PG&E, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric. These are guys that are doing power delivery, power generation, distribution. And obviously, when high winds kick up, they have been found to be liable because of their assets. And so some of them have proactive ways of getting out in front, shutting the power down in advance of an incident, and or basically responding. And so we are the main supplier for some of the biggest utility companies as far as fire prevention. So they will literally treat their power poles, they'll put a donut, if you will, or a firewall around the asset. We've got some international customers in the solar space that they've lost everything in the past, and so now they come in because there's vegetation growing and there is the chance for fire. They will put down Komodo, again, as a prophylactic, as a firewall around the solar field. Same thing with battery packs, and now companies like PG&E, they're using the Tesla mega packs and whatnot. So keeping lithium-ion batteries out of fires is a good idea. So any time where there's a chance where vegetation and or something might combust and cause problems to the infrastructure, we can be deployed. And I think Rob has got cases of this internationally that we've been involved with. And then on the water side, I know that there was a fire down in Laguna. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was a water treatment plant, or it may have been a well. Anyway, the cause of the fire ended up being the pumps and the electrical systems that caused millions of dollars in damages. So now working with those types of water infrastructure folks, again, just being smart about it. In other words, it doesn't cost a lot. It's just being proactive and protecting the areas that are high risk, and putting the material down to both prevent the starting of the fire and also protecting that infrastructure should a fire encroach and come close to the asset.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit, kind of really about in a couple areas. First, kind of the bulk application. I think what's it, Fostech is the one that is kind of the red stuff that's generally used. From us looking at the water side, the concern is, using that in a watershed, what kind of contamination, are you looking at putting into the watershed? If it's around a pump station or water facility, those are the big concerns. And when I first heard and listened to you guys talk about your product. That's what really struck me, is that environmentally friendly aspect. Is CAL FIRE starting to look at you more as one of those key vendors to help in that when the fire does become big, being a product that can be used to, one, fight the fire, but also environmentally friendly?
Yeah, that was a loaded question. Thank you for that, Jim. So I'll take the last question first, CAL FIRE. So there are some 70, 80 air bases throughout the continental United States that the Forest Service and CAL FIRE mans, operates, and helicopters and fixed wing aircraft operate. And that's what you see on CNN when a major wildfire breaks out and you see retardant being dropped. Perimeter Solutions has a product called FosCheck. It's been around for a lot of years. It's a good product, and they are the dominant supplier in that space. Excuse me. And the product has fertilizer type of characteristics. They're dealing with ammonium phosphate type chemistry. These are not dangerous, they're not unsafe, but like you mentioned, you don't really want them getting into your waters and your wells. The U.S. Department of Agriculture and U.S. Forest Service is really the governing body for these categories of products. In other words, when we came up with the product, we were very excited because it worked so good and we were coming up with applications and uses, and it was a no-brainer. You have to use this. And the product actually does three things. It's not just a retardant. So we say three killer apps in one product. It's a suppressant. In other words, if you want to put out a fire, it's hundreds of times more effective than water or foam. Okay. So it does a very good job of suppressing and putting out the fire with minimal material. In other words, if you had a backpack or if you had a small tank that you were carrying, you would be able to get X number of firefighting with one container. But if you had that same container filled with Komodo, you might get 50X, 30X, 10X more firefighting bang for the buck. And we're fortunate to have been selected by the Forest Service as one of only 2 or 3 companies in the entire world that have that, what's called the QPL listing, qualified product listing. And they do a multi-year, it's a very extensive evaluation. It's very expensive. And they go through the certification and they assume that it works good on fire. They don't really even test it for fire. They test it for exactly what you said. What if we accidentally spill some into a water body? What if it gets into an organic dairy farm or an ag farm? What if the winds are such that we kind of drift and fall into a neighboring property? So they're looking at other attributes and other aspects of the product that could come back and can cause problems, and mainly around the environment. And that's something that I'm passionate about. I mean, for us, being green or being eco-friendly and environmentally friendly, that's not a marketing term. We mean it. That's not negotiable for us. We don't allow any products that have any kind of environmental concerns or potential phase outs in the future, just because it's a hassle for us to handle, right? So we're just being proactive and being smart about the ingredients. The other thing that I like, and I've learned over the years, being a California kid and dealing with the high-tech community, we've learned that, we have to look at the upstream and downstream supply chain issues. And so whenever possible, we try and employ sustainable materials. If you can grow something, it's kind of like the forest, right? We make paper products, but we can always grow more trees. And so Komodo, in that regards, we use a lot of plant-based materials. And we get a cost benefit because a lot of these are dross. They're kind of biomass, if you will. You might eat the corn, but we'll take the corn husk, for example. I'm just using that as an example. So we have an endless supply of these kind of ag products that we use as kind of our raw material set, and then we're putting those back into the field. The other aspect is it's very, very focused, so we're not mass releasing, and we know the byproducts of our product. Companies like the power utilities or departments of transportation have looked at multi-year environmental studies. We've had European companies that have done multi-year studies on, runoff and what does it do when it gets into the water table, the soil. What does it do when it gets into a water body like a lake or a stream? And so again, obviously these are engineered materials, and as natural as we can make them, we want to minimize any kind of a release. Even with the blessing of the U.S. Forest Service and the USDA, we still try to minimize it, and we're not resting. We have several formulas in the pipeline. In fact, we're working on a fully organic version of Komodo. The problem with that is, we can make it organic. We've known how to do that for a couple of years. The problem is the government wants a stable product. They want to be able to buy a truckload or 10 truckloads and keep it in Colorado or in Idaho or in Washington or Southern California. And if they don't use it this fire season or the next fire season, they want it to still be good 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Well, when you've got an organic product, you're going to have things that go bad because there are no preservatives in it. There are no harsh chemicals in it. And so those are the kinds of challenges that we're working with. But, the environment is not negotiable for us. When I got into Komodo's, in this business, we learned a lot about fire and fire behavior, fire planning. But one of the things that I give a lot of talks on is actually the environment, because most people think a wildfire releases soot and carbon and greenhouse gases into the environment. But what I've learned is actually what goes into the ground, what goes into the water table. There are chemicals that are released that the news really doesn't talk about, and most firefighters don't think about. And when I challenge them, many fire chiefs, they come back and they're like, well, what are we going to do? Turn the entire state into a Superfund site? I said, well, what's the alternative? Our kids are going to be bathing in this stuff. And so when you look at a Paradise, when you look at a Dixie Fire, when you look at some of these larger events, and we've got lead and benzene, and now with all these electric vehicles that are everywhere. So if we don't get this under control, the fire retardant and the fire chemicals are the least of our worries.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're talking about having it in storage for 2 years, I agree. They may be looking at that, but how much product really in the long run is stored that long, just because of the number of fires in the Western United States and even the Southwest, that it's almost like that product would just be used on an annual basis, or a certain percentage of it. And having something fully organic, to me, makes a lot of environmental sense. One of the areas we touched on just a little bit really was that water sector. And then that's what drew me to your product. I'd like to kind of get some discussion going around water, and mainly in the area of when we're talking fire, and we don't have a real good partnership between water and power when it comes to fighting fires. Yes, PG&E is looking at protecting their poles, but the firefighters need that pump station that burns up. And we've seen that in the park fire, in the campfire, that water facilities are affected. And that's where I'm looking at a partnership. I'm the outgoing president of CalWARN. So that's the mutual aid, mutual assistance network for all of water in California. But I'm still going to be involved. And one of those areas that's key to me is protecting those water pumping facilities during a fire, and we're just not doing a good job of that right now. And so, do you have any kind of vision on how we might be able to work with CAL FIRE, with the electric utilities, Cal OES, to do a better job in that sector?
Um, well, yeah, I think people ask me, I talk with reporters and they ask me, well, what's your biggest challenge as a business guy? And I always say education, awareness. Um, the traditional firefighting model has been one that is reactive. We wait for the alarm to go off, we wait for somebody to call 911, and then the trucks start rolling. So part of our charter is to try to disrupt that. Part of what we're trying to do with automation, with equipment, with pre-treatment, and putting this type of firefighting or fire prevention into the hands of the people that are actually in those areas. And I think education, obviously, podcasts like this, discussing it, talking about it, not being afraid of failing. I mean, the whole place is going to burn. Is it going to be any worse than that? Trust me, no, not really, right? And so, as far as water, the last month we were getting ready to go down to Ventura. We sent a couple of our folks down there because there were a lot of homes that were destroyed. And there was one news report that was quite sad because the reporter was giving the interview. The home behind her was completely gone. You could only see the sticks of the frames, and it was on fire. The roof was completely gone. The home was completely burned up. And then to the right of her was a fire truck. And the firefighters were actually rolling up their hoses, and the hydrant was on site. And the message on her report was, we don't have any water. Not that we don't have any water pressure, we don't have any water. And I turned to my marketing guys and I said, take a look at that. Here's a scenario where the truck is on site, the professionals are on site, the hydrant is on site, and yet the home is gone, right? So we have to have what I call kind of the distributed model, and that is empowering CAL FIRE, empowering OES, empowering the water departments, and really looking at all these other tools and coming up to modern standards with technology. Because some of these legacy enterprises are fairly conservative. And, I still have fire chiefs that ask me, and I put that stuff in my truck. I'm like, if it does 10x the performance of water or foam, why wouldn't you? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's not obvious. And so it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of data. It takes some training and discussions like this, and just bring in awareness to the public sector. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I would like to. There's a couple avenues I can see, and Isaac is one of them. I'll let him talk a little bit about it. But Cal Nevada section of AWWA, they have two committees that I think your product fits very well into. One is the Security and Emergency Management, which Isaac is the chair of, and I'll let him talk a little bit about that. But getting out in front of some of the utilities to be able to have them hear what this is all about and how it works. Second, new technology. In the area of water, this would be something that's adopted that is in a way a new technology. Perfect scenario is in these fire-prone areas. Prior to the fire season starting, water utilities, to me, would be a good partnership with electric or whomever to go through as electric utilities are spraying the poles and they come to a water pump station. All right, yeah, there's some payment that may need to be made to have that, but let's protect that water pump station because that's going to be needed in the fire. And again, there's those three partners that aren't talking to each other right now: the water company, the power company, and fire. Fire needs the wet stuff. Well, the wet stuff needs the power. And so that partnership needs to be there. And that's where I'm hoping in the kind of the 2025, one of my goals is to really be able to work with you and others to establish a better connection in that area. That's where some entity like the Fire Safe Council, they've got two water utilities that are on their board. Getting that connection and getting them in the process, yeah, can they do mitigation and spray their facilities in advance? Water utilities may not want to do that just yet until we can see some real, I guess, kind of the proof in the pudding. But also there's the potential, especially in the mountainous areas and the wildland fire interface, where it isn't a large utility. It's a small mutual that may not be able to afford that mitigation in advance. But if we can, as the fire's starting, know where those utilities are and coordinate with CAL FIRE, the local fire, Cal OES, and the State Water Resource Control Board to get a mission number, get the resource out there, protect that facility so that when the fire does come through, it just jumps over that facility and they're still pumping water, whether it's with a generator or power from the local power company. Kind of would really like to get your view on, does that seem like a good goal in 2025, and where do you think we can take that?
Oh, I think that's excellent, and that's exactly what's needed is having these entities talk to each other, understand that that it's helping each other, and obviously Komodo is a non-intrusive way. It's a non-expensive way. We could apply it. We can have independent contractors apply it. The water department or the power department can apply it themselves. It doesn't even have to be applied until there's a fire. In other words, this could be kind of like when you have an evacuation, you got to grab the pets, you got to grab the medicine, grab the go bag. Well, this can be one of those things. Is let's identify those high, important zones and get out there and protect those. And there's going to be a team that does that. Some of the more advanced utilities have those types of teams now. So they get out in front and they look at the wind patterns, they look at the fuel loading and how the fire is going to move and which assets are going to be at risk. So they respond. They don't we say prevention and getting out there proactively to make sure that things don't burn, but they actually only apply product when there's a threat of fire. They don't do it when there is no fire. The other aspect is, again, I learned a lot from contamination, especially in the water, because people don't understand that, when you pyrolyze things, you change their chemical structure, their molecular structure, and you release them. So let's say you have an older home in Yosemite or in Lake Tahoe, and let's say it was built in the 50s or 60s, and there's a lot of lead paint, right? Well, when that structure burns, you've now taken a very stable form of locked in lead paint that was perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not going to harm anybody. But now you've released it into the water. And you've changed its form that it now is breathable, it's soluble, and it's much smaller. So again, the same thing is true with automotive chemicals and heavy metals. So if we understand the risk and we do a risk reward kind of analysis, it makes a lot of sense. And more than anything else, is exactly what you said, Jim, is like we can't afford for this pump station to not have power. Kevin Conant, for example, is on the Santa Clara Fire Safe Council. He's a former fire chief. He's also one of the leading guys at PG&E. He's a friend, and we work together, and he sees this, and that's kind of his bridging, responsibility. I don't know if you've talked with him in the past, but that's kind of what it's going to take, is people that have a
Yeah.
mutual understanding and that can help other departments.
Kevin and I grew up in Cupertino together, so
There
and
you
know him well. Isaac, maybe you can talk a little bit about the AWWA aspect of this.
Yeah. So, yeah, like Jim said, I'm part of the Security and Emergency Management Committee for Cal Nevada. So it's all water utilities in California, Nevada, and we get together every month, talk about issues. And wildfires are a huge topic, especially during wildfire season. Sometimes we get together for emergencies and just see how water utilities can help each other, suggestions and tips they have. So it gets pretty crazy during wildfire sometimes. I did have and I think you guys would be great to present at one of our monthly sessions because I think a lot of people would benefit from this solution, especially our members. So maybe we can talk about that later. But I had a question, a very simple question. I think more like boots on the ground because I'm more boots on the ground kind of guy. I deal with maintenance guys. I deal with all the guys who, are out there doing the work physically. So I guess this question's more for Rob than it probably is for Shawn. But how does it, so let's say I'm a water utility and I have to protect acres and acres of land. I'm a water utility guy. I don't know anything about fire suppression. Do they do it themselves? Do they go out there and they spray the solution all over, or just run it down to me how it works, when you deploy all this solution like for a large volume of area.
Well, there's several ways you can do it. Komodo is one of those products. It can be deployed with as simple as a backpack bug sprayer, walking around doing very precision, um, efficient spraying that way. Or you can go as far as loading it into a 4,000-gallon water truck, turning on the sprayer and driving. Anything and everything in between. We've got units that we can outfit different utilities with that can be either trailer mounted, truck mounted. They have, 150, 300, 500-gallon tanks and hose reels and pumps, and they just go through and they can spray it out of a 1 inch, like a booster line off of a fire engine.
Oh, wow.
Um, Anything and everything. And simply all they have to do is spray it, kind of like a fog pattern on the nozzle and just coat whatever you want to not burn. And you don't need a lot. You can get anywhere between, depending on vegetation density and length and things of that nature, you can get anywhere between 100 and 200 square feet of coverage per gallon of batch product. So it really does go a long ways. And it's one of those products that when you are applying it, if it's starting to puddle or streak or run, you're using too much. Go faster, kind of thing. Um, but when it comes to large deployments like that, if they want to do it themselves, we can outfit them with a trailer type system. If they've got water trucks or water buffaloes, they can utilize those. If they want to really get in around equipment and make sure everything's secure around the building, you can put it in a backpack sprayer and walk around with the wand like you're spraying, any kind of pesticide or herbicide or something like that. Um, it's the same viscosity as milk. It's completely non-abrasive, non-corrosive, so it's not going to damage any equipment. It's a pH of 7, so it's not going to eat up at any gaskets, or if it gets on anybody's shoes or clothing, or it's not going to destroy, their PPE or anything like that. It's not going to give anybody any kind of rash or make anybody sick. So there's really the options are what do they have at their disposal? If you can use whatever you got to make it work, or if they want to plan ahead and have a system in place. And we even have automated systems to where, if they know there's a critical area, it's remote, no one's going to get there, they can put this thing out there and then it can either self-deploy or we can program it with telemetry to where they hit a button and it deploys and it will give you that coverage with nobody ever having to go out there.
Wow. Okay. And if let's say I want to protect a property, like what range should I spray to protect this property? Is it like 50 feet, 100 feet? Is there recommendations you guys have?
I will never ever tell somebody how wide of a fire break they need. There
No.
are so many variables. It depends on wind, it depends on fuel levels and fuel loading, it depends on topography. And if anybody ever tells you, hey, a 15-foot line is good enough, don't ever listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about.
Hmm.
Because if you've got a 50-foot wide line, but you've got screaming winds and a 100-foot flame length, that 50-foot line is not going to do a thing for you. So I always tell people make as big as a perimeter as you possibly can with the time you've got. Give yourself as much of a buffer as you possibly can. The same question came to me with those solar guys up in Canada. They asked me, well, how big of a line do I need to do? I said, I can't answer that for you. I don't know what your fuel loads are. I don't know what your topography is. I don't know what your wind patterns are. Do as big of a line as you can to give yourself that best defensible space.
Interesting.
But wouldn't it be also just protecting? I mean, you've got a quarter acre pump station. You've got two wells, pump houses that may be wood structures, and then the MCCs that could either be metal or wood. MCC stands for Motor Control Center. But anything that's going to burn on that property, and then if it's me, I'm going to be looking at, do I have a generator or the power pole? I'd want to all of those facilities so that at least it's going to jump over me. Is that correct thinking?
Yes.
Yeah, you spray the perimeter around, and like our logo, the Komodo, the O is an orange ring because that signifies for us the defensible perimeter that you're installing around your asset. And so in the middle of your circle, you have that pump station or whatever infrastructure you're trying to protect. Everything you spray around it is going to be protected, and that fire is just going to go all the way around you and jump over. And you're not going to have to worry about ember cast or anything like that because you've treated that area there. So, you know, I don't recommend just give me a line on the leading edge of the fire, because all that's going to happen is it's going to circle around that leading edge and come back on you and back into you. Give yourself a full 360-degree defensible space.
And as Jim mentioned, if you have electrical or plumbing type of assets or rooms, just douse that area, create as much of a defensible space. We know that embers can get airborne and fly, a kilometer, 2 kilometers, a mile, even longer in some cases. So as Rob mentioned, I mean, you could have a 50-foot or 100-foot break and have it still jump that break. We've had people that have created kind of a checkerboard type of a pattern. In other words, it's going to get too expensive to treat, hundreds and hundreds of acres. But if we could do some sort of a checkerboard pattern, then even if an ember lights this area on fire, well, that fire is contained because on four sides, it's going to hit a wall. So you might have a little bit of a burn, but it's going to burn itself out. And as Jim mentioned, if you've got pumps, if you've got, sheds, if you've got electrical equipment, you basically protect those areas. The fire could come to it and engulf everything around it. And we have had a very, very good success rate. In fact, PG&E, the last 2 summers in 23 up in Oregon, and then this year in the Chico, that was the park fire, right, Jim?
Yeah.
So they treated a variety of assets. I mean, they even treated a PG&E truck. I want to say a tree in some community, but for the most part, it was their power assets and their utility assets, and they had 100% success rate, and they equated that to hundreds of millions of dollars, and also the downtime associated with that, because you're talking about communities, obviously businesses, hospitals, and some of these are, critical because they cannot not have power. And
Yeah.
I think that's what Jim's talking about when he's talking about pump stations and, infrastructure that cannot go down for whatever reason.
And for me, that's the key is, part of the biggest problem of rebuilding that community is the critical infrastructure. So if we can take care of the water, power, telecom, those critical assets that people need to rebuild, Um, that's important, but also to me it seems that with a high success rate, this should be something that the California Insurance Commission is looking at. That, yeah, if you're treating your property, one, you're doing the defensible space trimming, vegetation management, all of those things, but also treating to suppress the fire so that your property is not going to burn. Well, there should be a financial benefit when it comes to insurance and being able to insure that property and get a decent rate.
Exactly right.
Okay. Isaac, any questions you might have?
Yeah, so I saw on your website, you explained Komodo Dragon product very well. So I want to thank you and you and Rob for being here. But I also saw something called Fire Ready. Am I right? Something called Fire Ready, and is that more for residential, personal use?
So the Fire Ready 911 system is a system that we've developed just because we found a lot of our customers, instead of using it in a prophylactic type of manner, they do use it in a just-in-time type of system, like with PG&E, for example. They spray it in the presence of wildfire. They go
Okay.
out and they protect their assets just in time kind of model. So what we've done is we developed that system and we kind of equate it as a homeowner's tool for a just-in-time treatment of their property. And what they can do, just like a Generac generator sitting on the side of your house in case you have a power outage, it fires up and your fridge stays on, your air conditioning, whatever the case may be. If you get an evacuation notice or you have a fire coming, you have a system at your property that you can very quickly deploy, treat your property, treat your home, grab your stuff, get out. Avoid the danger. Don't stay behind with a garden hose. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. Just do that. Give yourself the best fighting chance to mitigate that threat and have your property or your home survive that situation. So that's what that system is. We've got various levels of it. There's the base model for a homeowner. There's a little bit bigger for larger kind of estates. Um, but that's also the type of system that we would try and outfit like one of your water districts with, because we can mount it into the back of a pickup truck. We can mount it onto a trailer, and it's mobile, and they can go out there and they can move from site to site and protect those assets or those infrastructure properties. Um, Very similar to a fire skid that you'll see in the back of like a Type 6 fire engine for traditional fire service. It's modeled basically after that. It's just, modified and engineered to pump Komodo and work very, very well with our product, because our product isn't water. It does act a little bit different than water, but um, that's what the Fire Ready system is.
Okay. And I don't know if I missed it, but you did say that you could store this for a certain amount of time. I know it's organic and it probably does expire, but did you say how long it'll last if, like, let's say a water utility stores it for a while?
So for
So
enterprise customers, and Rob knows this because he's got to deal with, we put a 3-year shelf life stamp on it,
Oh,
just as
wow.
far as
Okay.
good practice, right? Now, does it go bad? We've got 5-year-old, 6-year-old inventory that works just as good as new. But the lawyers are going to prevent me from saying, don't worry about it, use it whenever you want. So really that 3 year is just to give the end user an idea of when it was made. And, if it's kept indoors, if it's kept out of sunlight and out of freezing conditions, you're going to be able to utilize it. We understand that there are bad fire years and good fire and worse fire years, let's put it that way. And so you may not use it. Jim mentioned that, for the organic, we actually have one client that's in the insurance business, for example, and they're going up on their 3rd year, right? They keep filling their trucks and then they put them back in the totes because they haven't had any fires. So it just really depends on the activity level and, who's using it and under what circumstances they would use it. But as manufactured, when we ship out drums or totes or pails of the product, typically it's a 3-year shelf life And then we can recertify it. In other words, if it's older than that, we'll do a sample and we'll say, okay, we'll take it back and we reconstitute it and recertify it.
Wow, that's pretty good. I was, yeah.
Yeah. Shawn, I've seen systems where they kind of do for a house right now, it's water, but it's like a sprinkler based system that there's a tank of some sort connected to a pump that whether it's manually fired up or automated when the fire gets close, but will protect a facility. Have you looked at partnering with any of those sorts of entities? Because again, if they're relying on a public water system and that water system isn't there, to me, having a tank of your product and that fires up and spreads, that seems to be a kind of a unique and efficient way to apply without having to even be there.
Yeah, about 4 years ago, Rob and I, actually, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 years ago, but we were at the WUI conference in Reno, and we met with some folks out of Canada. I know, for example, Harry at Frontline. There are a number of companies that make very good systems, and you're exactly right. To simplify it, it's basically sprinklers mounted on your roof or along your eaves and your gutters. And should a wildfire come, the premise is that the system goes on, it soaks the structure, and so now you have you have a wet roof basically, or you have a wet structure so that embers are not easily going to ignite it. So that part of it is good, and that's a good program. And they do use some additives, things that are wetting agents, surfactants, basically foam like soapy type material just to be able to penetrate roof lines and shake shingle and wood paneling. However, as you pointed out, and as I mentioned in Ventura, a lot of times the water is shut off or the power is shut off because the power company had to shut it off. So they don't, these systems, unless they have their own battery backup or they're self-contained, some of the systems that we have bids, for example, out for Hawaii because of the Maui fires, for example. We call them our Komodo dome system. These are freestanding, completely off-grid. They're not connected to water, they're not connected to power, and they have their own detection system. So if you could imagine a wildfire comes, the cameras and the detectors sense it, sends a signal to the owner that says, hey, Isaac, we're seeing a fire, coming towards the property. I'm going to deploy unless you tell me to stand down. And if you don't respond, it basically cranks up and it basically empties the content and coats the entire property with Komodo. And even that is not a sure way of surviving the fire, but we guarantee that embers are not going to easily start. And even if ignition happens, you have a lot more protection than you would with just water, because you have to remember a wildfire is burning at around 1,600 degrees. And, fires happen normally during the dry season in the summertime. So even if you're able to get the structure wet or the property wet, water boils at 100 degrees. So you've got this wall coming at you and, a quarter of a mile, a half a mile before the fire even gets to the property, it has baked off any moisture you were able to get on the ground. So in other words, it's a partial solution. I don't want to say it's not good, and I don't want to say it's the end solution, but we believe that, as Jim mentioned, the combination of Komodo with those sprinkler systems, and we do have some partnerships with guys like that, but our dome system is much more of a reactive, automated, and asset agnostic. We don't care if it's a vineyard or a solar array or it's a pump station, right? And so that is the way that we respond to approaching wildfire.
Well, I think we've got some avenues to investigate and move forward with, especially on the water side. Isaac, I kind of see this, whether it's a webinar or at the next conference, a great partnership, new technology, water
Yes.
quality, and security emergency management. All three of those committees would really have a stake in hearing this and seeing how this could better mitigate fire for water utilities, whether it's watershed and they're worried about water quality, or the utility itself protecting infrastructure, and then in areas of taking a look at this as we maybe getting some of these rapid deployments, whether it's with some of the larger utilities and they can have the facilities and the equipment in place to rapid deploy when a fire happens, having some of that cadre around the state. Then it's just working with our partners at Cal OES, State Water Resource Control Board, Division of Drinking Water, and being able to activate the resource, get out there, protect the facility, and then document as much of that as possible so that we can really show, I think, what could be a huge benefit to the water sector.
Yeah, Jim has a point, and I had another follow-up question. Is there other retardants that work the same way? Are you guys kind of unique in that way? Because I mean, I don't have any experience in this at all, but especially if you came to one of our conferences and spoke, they kind of like you when you speak neutrally and talk about the industry in general. Is there different types? Like I think I've seen foam. I want to say.
So foam is designed to create a blanket, if you will, and to kind of suffocate the fire and to starve it of oxygen. So foam is very good for petrochemical, aircraft,
Okay.
fuel type fires. And so we do have what we call Komodo fluorine free foam, which is kind of the AFFF replacement. And so we do offer a foam product in our portfolio. But in the category of the prevention that we're talking about, we're a little bit unique. There are other products that are out there. Like I said, the Phos-Chek guys have been around forever, but they're really focused on the air tanker bases and really
Okay.
putting out the fire as opposed to preventing fire.
Okay.
And our goal in partnering with folks like yourself and just bringing awareness, I was in Hawaii. I had to go meet with the fire chief, and we had donated a fire truck to the Maui guys because they lost their engine one. Anyway, what I saw was even Verizon had to bring in mobile systems because they had lost all their towers. So as Jim mentioned, it's not just water assets, it's not just power assets, it's even telecom, right? And they had these very fancy mobile trucks with the telescopic antennas. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going to really slow everything down, just the rebuilding effort. And so part of our approach is, okay, let's really investigate the problem. And what would be beneficial, Jim, I don't know if you have this information or if it even exists, but in the big fires of the last, let's say 10, 15 years, how many water assets have been engulfed or have been damaged or, went down hard? Maybe they survived, but they weren't able to help during the wildfire. So if we have that piece of information as kind of the motivation for, okay, let's, we're not talking about long dollars here. We're not talking about millions and millions of dollars and a lot of software and AI. And, this is fairly rudimentary, simple stuff. And we could take a beer keg with Komodo in it in a pressurized system, park it next to one of your wells, and as Rob mentioned, put sensors and stuff on it so that you don't even have to send anybody out there. You don't have to hire a contractor or ask for, assistance from one of the mutual aid guys. It's you hit a button on your app and it just dumps the contents of that pressurized system. And yeah, that might cost a few $100s or a few $1,000s, whatever the numbers are, but look at what you get for it. Like I said, in two major wildfires, PG&E, and this is their own internal reporting, they came back with over $100 million of assets that survived, right? And that's not really what they count as the feather in the cap. They're really excited because their communities didn't go down. They didn't have a blackout period and having to go and rebuild. So I think all of that, I think, justifies and makes a good case for what we're talking about. But again, it's going to take people that have that can-do attitude, that recognize what's at stake, and we don't want to be reactive. You know, we live here. This is a great state. We take the lead in environmental protection. We take the lead. It's sad that we have to have these massive events that wipe out communities and just, you know, they're an economic disaster, they're an environmental disaster. And like I said, our goal is to be able to participate in a small way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot that we can do. You know, a lot of the larger utilities, the investor-owned utilities. I came from one that had just one big contiguous area, but it had a lot of assets in the wildland fire interface area. So, you know, being able to protect those, there's others like Cal Water, Golden State Water, and so forth. They have some smaller systems that are vulnerable. I think that's an area that we can look at to help them protect their facilities. And again, some of the small mutuals, yeah, they may not be able to put the system in, but having some sort of a rapid response, it's different layers of mitigation and response. And if we can put that together, I think we've got a real benefit to those communities.
Yeah, and with that rapid response, we have, you know, some vendor applicator partners that have already committed to me just from our conversations, you know, prior that, you know, a matter of 8 hours, they can be anywhere in the state to deploy Komodo.
And I think we should really investigate how we can potentially make that happen with taking some of the technology where you get the early warning that activates the network. One of our partners, we're going to actually be talking with them tomorrow, ACS, Alliance for Community Solutions, where they can then notify the network of partners like you're talking about. We get on a call, which utilities are potentially in the path. All right, let's get out there, get a mission number from Cal OES, treat those facilities, and show some benefit to the communities they serve.
Yep.
All right. Well, any closing comments, Isaac? Anything else you wanted to hit real quick?
No, I'm good. I just want to thank Rob and Shawn for being here. I think you have a very interesting solution. I think you guys can help a lot of not only water utilities, but a lot of other utilities and you know, private residents as well.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, are you familiar with the California Utilities Emergency Association? It is an association that all the major water utilities in the state belong to. They have a seat at the State Operations Center. My replacement, the incoming president for Cal Warren, has some connections with not only them, but Cal OES. I think it would be good to talk to that organization to show what you have and how you can help the broader you know, critical infrastructure community, because their members are water, power, telecom, gas, all of the major utilities. So there could be a great potential partnership there.
No, we appreciate it, gentlemen. Like I said, it takes a little bit of you know, out of the box thinking and open-minded. You know, this week CES is going on in Las Vegas, the computer electronics. And so we've all seen the little rover, the Boston Robotics dog. We've also seen the Tesla humanoid robot. And so I can't get into details of what we're working on, but you can imagine equipping one of those types of pieces of equipment with a backpack full of Komodo under pressure and then sending it into a very hazardous environment, let's say a chemical room, let's say a gas room that's filled with fire, right? Normally, a firefighter wouldn't go in there because of loss of life, because of the type of exposures, just because of the inherent hazards. But now, through technology, through sensors, and this stuff is becoming very affordable. I mean, for less than the price of a pickup truck, we're talking about. And the other aspect of that is not just successful firefighting or being able to get into rooms like data centers and battery backup, storage centers and places again that would expose humans to high hazard. The other aspect is these types of robotics. Not only are they expendable, not only are they available now, you can train them, you can use AI to teach them to respond to specific areas of interest, but it's very, very focused. We're not relying on a sprinkler system anymore that has to flood the entire facility. We could walk up to that cabinet, literally open doors, go up the stairs, and walk up to the source of that particular cell, that particular battery, or that particular motor that's burning up and put the fire out locally. It's game changing, right? And so when I see technology like that become affordable and become accessible, okay, all it takes is a little bit of vision and a little bit of being open to the concept of doing things to prevent loss. And again, in the spirit of saving lives and saving the environment.
Awesome. Well, hey, really appreciate your time, and I think a lot of good information that not only water utilities, but anyone in the emergency management arena is going to take from this discussion. Isaac, I'll let you close everything out.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank you guys again. And is there, if you want to do real quick, a way for our listeners to reach you, what would be the best way?
I think obviously our website is komodo-fire.com. You can come in through the CSR kind of email. I'm Shawn at komodo-fire.com. Rob is Rob so it's very simple. Rob at komodo-fire.com. Our website is, we're constantly upgrading it, so it's not even reflective of who we are or what we do, but it will be going through some upgrades over the course of the next couple of quarters. Social media and just directly reaching out to us on our 800 number. And we do get back to all of our people. So.
Okay, great. Right. Thanks, guys.
Real quick, let's keep the discussions going with some of the areas that we've talked about. Maybe in the spring, just before fire season, we could have some things in place that could be announced as, hey, here's what everyone wants to be prepared for going into the next fire season.
Absolutely. We appreciate it.